I'd like you to go back to when you were like 9 or 10, when you were just a little bit of a thing. And I'd like you to think about who influenced you, who was there for you, who had impact, who believed in you and helped you tap into that potential that we all have, right? So can anybody remember that person? Can you show me your hands? Right? Wow, nice. Can you think for a minute about that person and how much of an impact they had on helping you create that foundation upon which you built your life? Same show of hands, I'm guessing, right? Big numbers, right? Big difference they've made. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about who we are. So I was a general contractor for many years. I had to teach myself because it wasn't really an option because I was a girl back in the 80s. I still am. Just clarifying. So girls weren't really welcome in the construction industry. My first construction site, there were 500 men and me. And it was 50 pounds ago, so you didn't know I was a girl, and I had to wear a baseball hat, and I couldn't look like a girl. So it was amazing because I was left on my own because I couldn't work with a whole bunch of men. I had to be on my own, so I did like the worst stuff on a job site, right? I don't even want to say what that was. But so through that experience, I learned that, we're kind of shortchanged. But it's all good because I went through this, and then at one point in my life, almost 30 years ago now, I had a little girl stumble into my life. Her name is Nikki. She's now 37. She was 9. Cutest little kid you ever saw. Long brown hair, freckles. Her parents struggled with addiction, a lot of addiction. And as a result of their struggle, this was the best thing that ever happened to me. She ended up in my life. And I ended up, I never went to summer camp as a kid, but I thought, I bet it'd be a great thing for this kid to go to summer camp. So I looked into summer camp, and at that point in my life, I was a general contractor, a struggling general contractor, because that girl thing, girls don't build. So I went to a Girl Scout office, and I asked her if I could sign this little girl, Nikki, up for camp. And I couldn't afford it. Big surprise. So in exchange, they offered to have me teach woodworking at a summer camp with girls. And I thought, as a contractor, when homeowners' children would come home from school and say, "What are you doing?" I would say, "What are you doing?" And I would give them a little tool belt. When you put a tool belt on a little kid, they'll do anything. And they'll feel powerful doing it. They'll feel successful doing it. Could be sweeping the floor. They're high as a kite. They're wearing a tool belt. So that's how this sort of happened. And then, so after having spent a week at a summer camp teaching girls how to build, they build till midnight. I mean, the camp director wasn't really happy because it was kind of late, but they just wanted to build. Everything about building with girls says strong, it says successful, it says smart, it says all these things girls aren't used to hearing, right? We're a bunch of powerless little people. We're really not. We're really not. And so what happened was, after that experience, I in between jobs, I would try to set a couple days aside so I could go to a different camp, because I started getting phone calls, and I thought, okay, this is a little bit crazy, because I felt like I was letting down more girls than I was helping, because there was always such a long line of girls that wanted to do this, because girls want to feel powerful. Girls are powerful. They just don't have the chance to discover that in many arenas. So we provide that, don't we? So, okay, we have to go back to this one. This is we'll do that one at the end. So here's a photo of, so fast forward, so I built this big barn on my property, and that's where we started this nonprofit. And I know I'm supposed to stay on topic, but can we change the term nonprofit to all profit? Really? I mean, it's just, and I know I'm off topic. I know I'm in trouble, but you know what? Think about it, right? A nonprofit, what is non about it? We're not making a lot of money, but you know what? Everybody benefits, right? It's an all-profit. A for-profit, it goes in a few pockets. So can we just work on that? I know it's another talk. I'm sorry, I'm in so much trouble. Okay, so here's a picture of this. How cute are these kids? So when you build with girls, we don't spoon feed them. We give them very little information. We show them how to use the power tools, and we keep them super safe. I'm a little obsessed with safety. But we have an understanding, we have an extensive conversation about safety, and we use everything you see on a job site. We don't use nail guns, because I don't really like nail guns. We use cordless screw guns. How many of you used a cordless screw gun? Is that not the best tool in the world, right? How much do you rock when you use it? So we use cordless screw guns to put everything together. But so the setup on a job site, so we initially had all the programs in our workshop. And so then about 8 years ago, we went on the road, and we traveled to different locations all over New England, and we set up a workshop. Because as a contractor, I brought all my tools, right? So why can't I just bring them to camp? So what happens is we set up this big chop saw, and which is needed for everything we cut. And when they're using the chop saw, again, I'm obsessed with safety, and we've had almost 7,000 girls through this program without a scratch. Can somebody knock on wood? I'm knocking. So we're one-on-one, and the chop saw is sort of a sacred space. Like, you dare go in that space with someone else in that space, and you have to leave. End of story. And there are guidelines that we set in place so that there's a incredible understanding where you can't cross that line, because they know. If any of them are using a power tool and they see, and I see their eyes and their hands are using a power tool, if I make that connection, I do this and that, and they're gone. And they're not allowed back. And we talk about all this beforehand, and I say, so should you get a second chance? Should you be able to come back? And you know what they all say? No, because we could get hurt. So we get them so focused in that initial step. And so the first tool we give them is a palm sander, right? Who's using a palm sander, right? Crazy cool tool, right? But you can't get hurt, right? So we shape them into this focus mode of like being in your zone. We threaten their lives. We got to be in the zone. So we tell them, if you can be in the zone with the palm sander, you graduate, so you can use more tools. Thank you. So after the palm sander, and we actually have to shut them off, because we could let them sand for days. It's their first tool, right? Your first power tool. Everybody remembers your first power tool. I probably should. But so anyway, so from the palm sander, we go into all these different tools. And so basically, whether they're building a little 1-hour shaker pegboard, a small project, or they're building an entire shed, which is what you see back here, it's all the same equipment, right? So you can start them with a really small project that they can take home, which I might add is not a woodworking project, it's a trophy at that stage. And don't try to get that from them. It's crazy how, this is such a huge symbol, right? When you do anything that you're so proud of, this is like yours. I did this, and it's a reminder that you rock, which these kids need. So this is a fabulous shed. Is that not the cutest shed ever? So let me tell you a story about this shed. This shed is, we started this shed on a Monday morning. We partner with camps all over New England. Child and Family Services, one of my absolute favorite partnerships. We started this shed on a Monday morning. I've got 11 little girls walking down the hill. Cranky, it's Monday morning, but I'm a happy camper on my camp. So out of 11 of them, we sit down, we have our conversations, and a bunch of them are kind of really struggling with attitudes. And I said, so how many of you are up for this? Because I need you fully in the zone. If you can't be in the zone, it's totally cool. You can just sit off to the side and support everybody that is in the zone. I got 4 out of 11. Now, a little bit of a background, a lot of these kids have parents that are in rehab, parents that are in prison, parents that have dumped them early on because they just can't handle it. So think about the mindset, right? You want to talk a lousy mindset. Every reason to have it, though, right? So I've got 4 little builders. So I take them over, and the rest of them are sitting, and I said, so you're just going to sit, and you're just going to kind of hang and watch the others. And you know, the first thing, are we going to get in trouble? No, just watch. So I've got 4 builders. We show them how to use a level and square up the footings, and we talk about where they're going to go. And so now my 4 builders are walking to the truck with me to put a tool belt on. Okay, you see those little builders put that tool belt on? Guess where my little 7 are sitting off to the side? Guess where they are? They're at the truck. We're ready for our tool belts. I said, really? Where's your attitude? Oh no, we left our attitudes over there. I said, are you going to be in the zone? Oh, we're in. We're totally in. You know what happens? These girls want to feel powerful. Girls don't want to feel defeated or abandoned or neglected. They want to feel strong. They want to feel solid. And a tool belt we'll do it. We don't have to do anything with the rest of the day. We could just let them walk around in a tool belt. It's crazy. It's awesome. So, fast forward, the deck, the floor itself of this shed, based on the past experience of sheds we've done, should have taken the whole day. By lunchtime, I said, we were getting ready to put the plywood on. I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to square it up, see if everything worked out well. And when you square something up, you measure your diagonals. So I went over and, now remember, we talked about layout, we discussed all this stuff. I'm not doing anything. I'm standing at a saw. I'm holding the lumber. Because if their two hands are on the handle, who's getting hurt? That would be me. But I haven't, and I won't, because I trust each and every one of these little girls that aren't very often trusted. So I get down on my knees, and I got my tape measure, and I pull my first dimension, and they're sort of watching with anticipation. And I said, okay, so here's the dimension. So I holler out the dimension, and they're like, all right, and it's like a game, they're all psyched. So I pull the tape the other way, and I start shaking my head. And one of the little girls, right off the bat, she says, see, you guys, we couldn't do this. We can't build. We shouldn't be doing this. And I got so choked up, but I'm not going to today, because I've told this story so many times. And I looked at that little kid, and I said, you know what? Do you want to know what the dimension is? It was identical, because it was perfect. And you know what? It wasn't about perfect. It was about, you did this, but you didn't believe you did this. So I said, okay, so what's going on here? So we talk about all this stuff that goes on, and these kids are they're so defined by failure. They're so defined by failure. But if the people that brought you into this world have failed you, that doesn't define who you are. If you're failing in school because you're in survival mode, that doesn't make you a failure. You're more than your academic ability. You're more than parents that have failed you. There's so much potential in these kids, it's insane. So I said, okay, here's what's going to happen. Now that you realize you did everything right, and this is a fabulous job, and I'm so blown away. I used to hire men to do this stuff, and I'd have to help them square it up after. So can we talk about how this worked? And so it took a lot to get their mindset to catch up with what their body had just done. So I said, okay, we're going to put the plywood on, and then we're going to head over to lunch. And this was actually a really rough group, because a few of them were headed home if they didn't pull off their session with me. So we put the plywood on, they screwed it all down, they cut it all, I just watched. And so we headed off to lunch, and on the way to lunch we were talking, and everybody's chatting, and they said, so can you make sure you tell the staff that we were that good this morning? Behavior-wise, right? Because I never have issues with these kids. You give me the most difficult kids out there, I'll show you the best builders. So we get to the cafeteria, and camp director comes up to me, how were they? And I got all choked up. I didn't mean to, it just happened. Oh, they were that bad. I said, no, they were that good. I said, we're done. It took us half a day to do what should have taken us a full day. So, girls are incredible. Give them some power tools. We step it up a notch, and I know I probably shouldn't because my background is building, not psychology. But this is an amazing partnership. We have the Circle program. I don't know if anyone's heard of it. Those are some of the programs we offer. They have a mentorship component, and each girl has a mentor, which is really pretty brilliant. This was an old beat-up table, and so many of these girls carry so much hurt, so much pain, and just so many horrible things people have said to them. And so I give them Sharpies, and I have them write all over these tables, and then I show them how to cut up these words and get rid of them. And we talk about how it feels to get rid of them. And we cut these tables up after they wrote some horrifying stuff. And we loaded up these two big garden carts, and we went off to the dumpsters because they had paint, so we couldn't burn them. But so we loaded them. I wanted them to load them so they were hard to maneuver all the way to the dumpsters. And so we get to the dumpsters, and I said, okay, throw it like you mean it. Make sure you get rid of it like you mean it, like it's gone for good. Because sometimes we'll throw them in a fire if there's no paint, and they burn, and it's gone. So, they were throwing them. Whew. So on the way back, they asked me if they could jump in the carts, and I said, seriously, I'm the adult. I'm supposed to say no, but here's the thing. When I say stop, you better jump out, because if I get in trouble, you guys get in trouble. So they're all piling in, and so we're wheeling back, and they're trying to hold each other because they're all piled in, and they can't get hurt. But so I yell stop, and they freeze, and I said, okay, let's talk about what's going on here. Which load was heavier? We talked about how heavy the first load was, but it was more awkward than heavy. And we talked about how heavy it was to carry their friends, but how it's worth carrying heavy loads. Some loads are worth carrying. A lot aren't. So we talk about all sorts of stuff when we build. Incredible what happens. I mean, look at we're building a bookcase. This is how involved they get. And if they're not using that tool, they got to be right there. They're right on it. This is powerful for every single girl in that room. This is cool. This was a fundraising build we did for Circle program. We do these fundraising builds so that they can raise money for their different all-profit organizations. And this was we had hired an external evaluator to do we designed a questionnaire, and great, powerful, and smart. Whoa, I didn't catch up. Here we go. Great, powerful, and smart. That's what we're after. It doesn't matter what they build. It matters how they feel, where their mind's at. This is another program. They did bookcases, individual units. We screwed them all together, built this huge bookcase unit. Awesome teamwork, incredible teamwork. This photo, this little kid stops me in my tracks. She had 7 surgeries to remove different tumors. The last left her paralyzed. Her left arm is totally paralyzed. Didn't stop her. Nothing stops them. Size doesn't stop them. Girls need to build. They just need to build. We've got a music fest this evening in the Millyard that I'd like to invite you all to at the museum. And we did a metaphor table this year to show people that when you take old beat-up barn board and you look at it for the potential that exists inside of it, you can build beautiful things, much like our program does. We transform these kids. And we tap into their potential and we show them what they're made of. And this last slide that I have to show you rattles my cage to the core. This group of girls, one of the girls in this group has a parent in her life, only one. And for 2 months before camp, she and her mom lived in her mom's car because her boyfriend kicked them out. One little girl in this picture, she walked in on her second sister who had attempted suicide, and as a result, the state removed her from her home because she couldn't stay in her grandmother's care. One little girl in this picture has a mother who lives on the streets. She's a meth addict. The last time she saw her, she had no hair and no teeth, so she assumed that at this point she had died. She lives with her grandmother. And one little girl in this room lived with her aunt till the state took her away because the aunt's boyfriend was sneaking in her room at night, I'm sure doing a tremendous amount of damage. The difference between the faces in this photo and all of our faces is that somebody believed in us. Somebody supported us. Somebody showed us what we're made of, right? We're all made of that. And one of my absolute favorite artists, Andrea Bocelli, I'm sure most of you know him, fabulous. He sings this song, I Believe, and it's all about how children were born, much like the stars, to shine. We teach these kids to shine. We do it with power tools. And this is my dream come true, and we will get to as many of these kids as we possibly can. Because inside every single one of this kid is a ton of potential, unbelievable potential. Because inside of every one of these kids, much like everybody here, we all shine. And that's my dream come true.